Hi, I'm Kelly Corrigan, and I am sitting next to Francine Prose, who maybe there is not a more aptly named writer in the world than Francine Prose.
So I hear.
Yeah, right? So 20 books, novels, YA books, nonfiction, a Guggenheim, a Fulbright, and also a Harvard dropout.
Harvard graduate school dropout.
I mean, is that a special category?
Well, no, I got through my undergraduate years somehow, and then I was in graduate school for 2 unhappy years, and then I left.
And why?
Why? Because I couldn't stand the way people were talking about literature. I loved reading. I'd loved reading all the way through my early life, undergraduate, and suddenly I just could not figure out what people were saying. I mean, I would sit in these classes, these seminars, and just like sing country western hymns to myself in my head to keep from going crazy. And I thought, well, why am I doing this to myself? And I just left.
And
one of the happiest days of my life was dropping out. It was, I can't say enough for the pleasure of quitting.
So now, people all over America, you should just drop out of grad school. I think that's what we're hearing.
Hey.
Right? I mean, it's worked for you, clearly. You've got a phenomenal career.
And at that time, there was actually a job at the other end of it. Now, who knows?
Right,
I mean,
right. So it's even a better time to drop out if you didn't catch that. So tell us how you became how you came to be a writer from that experience.
Well, it was sort of despite that experience, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, being a writer, it was kind of the only thing I could do. You know, people say that and they think that you mean that's your vocation, but it was actually the only thing I could do. I've never been able to do anything else. I was a big reader as a kid. I always liked to write, and I just was terrible at every other job I had. File clerk, waitress, I mean, menial jobs. I was really bad, but I could write. So
I too aspired as a waitress. It's come up quite a few times since we've been in Miami.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of mistakes you can make.
Yeah. I find it much easier to be a writer than a waitress. So in 1973, someone said, at 25, Francine Prose appears to perceive more than a writer at that age decently should. And then you have famously said that writing cannot be taught. So do you think one of the things that cannot be taught is the sort of proclivity to perceive?
Well, I think you can do little exercises that help. I mean, for example, you can try listening. Instead of just waiting for your turn to talk. I mean, that's what I tell students. You know, you can actually try listening. You can try observing. There are things you can do to help out that way. So it's not as if it has to be an inborn talent.
And what have you learned in all these years of writing? What have you taught yourself?
What have I taught myself? Well, each book, you're kind of starting from zero. I mean, I wish I could say, oh, I've done all these books, so each new one is easier because of all I learned. But that's not the case. It's each book I'm just going back to zero and starting again. And in a way, that's what I'm trying to do. Because unless it's really hard, and unless it's really scary, and unless it's much more difficult than anything you've done before, what's the point of doing it?
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. Every time I start, I feel like I can't believe I ever did this once. Like, how did I ever climb this mountain? And maybe I should stop, quit while I'm ahead.
I like the feeling of it's too hard, I can't do this.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh, well, then you are a born writer. Then for sure, you can handle the stress of it. Did you have a great teacher in your life that you want to give a shout out to?
I had a bunch of great teachers. I was really lucky. I had a great high school English teacher. His name was Philip Schwartz, who showed up years later, like 30 years later, as a classics teacher in my son's high school. He had just kind of reinvented himself from being an English teacher to being a classics teacher. And he was still the most popular teacher in the school.
Yeah.
So I had a great high school history teacher. I had a great college writing teacher. So I've been very fortunate that way.
Yeah. And have you had any terrific, awesome, flamboyant flops?
Well, you know, I have many unfinished novels. I have like drawers and drawers full of unfinished novels, although every so often I recycle one and it kind of works out.
Yeah.
But
so there's hope for them.
There's hope for them.
There's hope that somebody... So was this a recycled novel?
No.
No,
that
was fresh from page one.
That was fresh from page one.
So you start this great book with the quote from Nabokov. Can you talk about it a little bit? Do you want to read it?
Yeah. Between the wolf in the tall grass and the wolf in the tall story, there is a shimmering go-between. Well, a part of the reason I used it, I mean, it's such a beautiful quote.
It's incredible.
But I wanted Nabokov's name in the book somehow because it's
just for like brand association.
Yeah, for brand association. But also because the book, you know, there are like 6 or 7 voices in the book, and each one is, except for one, is kind of a written document. I mean, people were writing letters, people were writing memoirs, people were writing biographies. And it's a very strange book. I mean, I'd never read anything like it, and so I had no models to go on. But the only thing I could think of, I mean, without trying to flatter myself too horribly, was Nabokov. You know, there was something Nabokovian. So I thought, well, maybe if I have his name in the book, it will give people kind of a slight little push in the right direction to being able to figure out how to read it.
Oh, that's so interesting. So the book celebrates the kind of ethos of Paris. Why did you go there? Were you afraid that many people had been there before and you wouldn't be able to recreate it in an original way? And what is the Paris of the 30s right now? Like, where is that Bohemia today that we'll look back on romantically 30 years, 40 years, 50 years from now?
Maybe it's Berlin. I mean, I keep thinking if I were 22 now and just starting out as an artist of any kind, I might move to Berlin. I mean, lots of young artists, rents are cheap, unlike any place in the United States where you might want to be. And I think there's a sense of people working together and making a life in art that it's very hard to do in a metropolitan center in this country.
And there's such a weird mashup in Berlin of these memories of World War II. I mean, everything seems affected by it, and then these sort of new growth plants that come up right next to it like a mall. Yeah. And so you picked Paris for this because?
Well, Paris, I didn't really pick Paris. Paris sort of wound up being where it happened because the book really started with the historical facts of the life of the main character. I mean, the book started with a Brassai photograph. And,
which is an incredible photograph.
Which is an incredible photograph. Two women in a bar, one's in drag and one's in an evening gown.
And you would barely know that the one in drag, I mean, if you just glanced at it, you would for sure think it was a man and a woman, I think.
Yeah, super butch, big shoulders, blah, blah, blah. And I had been to an exhibit of Brassai's photography, and there was a little wall text that said the woman in drag had gone to work for the Gestapo during the Nazi occupation of Paris. And I thought, oh, that's sort of interesting. Then I went online. And
not the most welcoming group for someone who dresses in drag.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I know, strange, right? And then I went online and found out that in fact she was this historical figure named Violette Morris, who'd been a French athlete and professional auto racer. And in 1935, the French government took away her license to compete professionally because she was a cross-dresser, which for some reason violated the Napoleonic Code. And Hitler found out about it and invited her to be his special guest at the Berlin Olympics. And she went to the Olympics as Hitler's guest, and by the time she got back, she was spying for the Germans against the French. She was the person who told the Germans where the Maginot Line ended so they could invade France. She did go to work for the Gestapo as a torturer, and she was assassinated by the French resistance in 1944. So that part is true.
Yeah.
So that...
And you can't ask for a better story than that. I mean, you just grab onto that and take it and just thank God nobody else got to it first, right?
As they say, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, really. And originally, I was going to do it as nonfiction just because it was such a crazy story. But I didn't want to do the kind of research involved. And plus, I thought how much more fun to do it as fiction. I mean, writing a big dinner party with Hitler from the point of view of a furious French cross-dressing athlete who's about to become a spy. What could be more fun than that?
Yeah. And have you heard a lot from the LGBT community?
I was concerned about it. But in fact, it's been great. I mean, very supportive, very enthusiastic. Luckily, there was a front page New York Times book review by Ed White, who's gay and who really got it, who really got what I was trying to say. Because, you know, in every community, there's a large variety of moral, you know, between the evil and between the good. And it's complicated. And certainly gender preference doesn't give you a corner on being a decent human being. I mean, I don't, you know, and I don't think anyone took it as an insult to a whole community. It was just an individual character in a book.
Oh, I was thinking that they would have rallied behind it. Then my immediate reaction was that they would find this fabulous.
I hope so.
Yeah.
And I think so. But but my worry was because the character was so complicated and so dark that would somehow be taken as something that I didn't mean it as.
Oh no, but so complex, and complex is great. Complex is respect, I think.
That's what I think.
Yeah, right on. You had this beautiful line in the beginning, the opening chapters from the perspective of this boy, pretty young guy, who is in the Chameleon Club, and he says, I didn't know whether, I was afraid to stare, and then I realized maybe they wanted me to stare. Do you have an opinion about that?
Well, you know, it's based on a real club in Paris. The real club was called Le Monocle, and it persisted well into the 50s. And you look at these photographs, and clearly people were dressed. I mean, one of the things that's so beautiful about it was how theatrical everyone was. So how can you not be and free? So how can you not want people to look and dress that theatrically? You know, I mean, you know, certainly you've seen. I mean, I know in my neighborhood there are guys who. With shaved heads who are tattooed all over their heads. Right. And then you stare and it's like, what are you looking at? Well,
I'm looking at
something interesting.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
the creation.
Right, an art piece.
I'm so sorry that we have to wrap up, but it's been awesome talking to you.
Thank you. It's been
Thanks
a pleasure.
for coming.